when we say systemic, typically evangelicals go, what do you mean I'm not responsible for anything? So if you work at a bank and the bank tells you you can only give loans to certain groups of people in certain areas of town, you individually may not be a racist, but you're participating in a racist policy. Mm-hmm. That's called redlining. That's how most cities became the way that they are. They were redlined, okay? And so systemically, you have dark powers, demons, who not only work through people, but systems that oppress human beings. So think about it. Imagine telling a Native American in 1895, you can be whatever you want to be. I mean, as you're getting shipped to the reservation, your ancestors have been killed. So we have to think not just in terms of ourselves, but the larger picture. And so the gospel calls us to not just care about me, but to care about the we.
Yeah. I have experienced a lot of resistance to almost all the ideas you just laid out amongst my fellow white evangelical brothers and sisters. And your example for me was so convicting because, and I'm going to be honest, this just happened to me the other day. I think, and I think you'd agree with this, that we need to be direct about confronting racism, whether it's individual racism or systemic racism. I don't really have any compunctions about saying it the way it is. Now, I think the way I say it and how I treat people matters tremendously to Jesus. And so I want to do it in a way that honors him with charity and grace and meekness and all the things that he talks about in the Sermon on the Mount. But someone came at me on Twitter to defend this racist perspective. And just to be honest, I unleashed on this guy. I mean, I just went nuts on him. And afterwards, I had to apologize to this racist dude, which is weird. And I told a friend, I go, I don't know how to say this. I am too impatient with racism. Like I am too unkind and ungenerous towards it. And then I read your book and the way you treated that guy and the way you treated other people who have a lot of the similar mindset. Again, it was so deeply convicting to me. So I guess just want to ask, I mean, how did you get to the point where you're responding the way you're responding to whether it's individual racism or systemic racism?
Today's racist is tomorrow's gracious. When you think of the Apostle Paul, he was a Jewish Pharisaical nationalist who persecuted the church.
Yeah.
He would have had nothing to do with Gentiles, and he became the apostles who built the Jew-Gentile church. And so just because a person is one way today does not mean the gospel cannot transform them and make them new tomorrow. And besides, and I think this is the greater point, no one can make you enter their circle of hate unless you let them.
What do you mean by that?
So let me give you a story. A couple of years ago, I'm at a stoplight. Some white dudes in a big old truck drive by and I hear the N-word. Typically, I would ignore it. This time, I just went postal and I'm flooring it down the street trying to catch up to them. I bob and weave through traffic like a NASCAR race car driver and I catch them at a red light. And I roll down my window and I yell, "What did you say?" And these young white dudes were terrified. And they were wrong. But when I saw their faces and the fear in their face, I immediately repented and I pulled off the side of the road. And I said, "Lord, I repent that I allowed them to draw me into their anger and their hatred." So what I'm saying is I don't have to respond because love is patient. Love is kind. Love is long suffering. I don't have to respond with unhealthy anger. Righteous indignation is great. We need righteous indignation, but I'm going to put coals on your head with love and mercy. I'm not going to let you know that you made me angry. And so that's what I'm saying. Like unhealthy anger draws us into the poison. It's like the old movies where someone gets bit by a snake and the person sucks the poison out. I don't know if that really works, but you probably get sick too. And so a lot of times when we respond with unrighteous anger, we become just like them. John Perkins told me a story. For those of you who don't know, John Perkins is.
Do you feel politically homeless?
Join the club.
Both parties are becoming more tribal and neither fully represent the values of Jesus. Christians need a path forward that leaves partisanship behind.
That's why we wrote Truth Over Tribe. pledging allegiance to the Lamb, not the donkey or the elephant. Together, we can end tribalism.
Pre-order the book on Amazon and let's start a movement.
Yeah.
Amazing. Anyway, in the early 70s, he was in a protest and he got arrested by police officers in Mississippi, and they did all types of horrible things to him. They put a spoon up his nose. They crushed his testicles. They made him clean up his own blood, and he thought to himself, if I had a grenade, I would blow everybody up in here, including myself. But then he said, if I did that, I would be just as bad as them.
Yeah. Gosh, you know, as you're talking, I'm thinking about Daniel's vision of the beasts that come up out of the sea and how each beast kind of devours the last beast that came before it. And that's kind of how world history works. It's like the Babylonians come along and they're evil and they're awful. And so the Persians come along to do the just thing. We're going to beat the Babylonians, and they end up devouring the Babylonians and then become like Babylon. And then Greece comes along and they, we're going to stop the evil Persians. And then they end up becoming like the Persians. And that's just the cycle of hatred and violence. It's just feeding more hatred, more violence, meeting more hatred, more violence. And of course, Jesus throws himself onto that wheel as a self-sacrifice. And says,
So my wife and I were just in Greece.
Yeah.
And as we learned the history of Greece, I finally said to the tour guide, so this is a history of just war.
Yeah.
And so I think Jesus comes to say, there is a better way. It's the way of the Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven.
Yeah.
Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. The way of Christ is so much better that if we live with Philippians 2:3 in mind, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but consider others better than yourselves. But we have to understand, though, the world's not going to be that way. The church is. The church is to be an outpost of hope. I'm going to use a big word. The church is the eschatological picture of what eternity is to be.
Can you define that for us?
Yeah.
When most people hear scat, they're thinking of something else.
Yeah, they're thinking something. Yeah, eschatological just means end times. There's going to be a new heavens and a new earth. We're going to have glorified, resurrected bodies.
Yeah.
Whatever ethnicity you are now, that's what you're going to be. Every nation, tribe, and tongue. It's going to be beautiful, beyond description. It is glorious. Well, the church is to be a portrait of that. We shouldn't expect world governments who don't know Jesus to be that. The church is to be a light on a hill, not a nation. The church is a holy nation. We're holy people within unholy nations.
Yeah. Well, and that highlights the risk of anytime any nation tries to take the word Christian and slap it right on top of things. Because, as you just said, the church is the holy nation, and the church is not a single nation, a single ethnicity, a single nationality. It's none of those things. It is itself a diverse holy nation.
Yes. And so that's why it's very important that, particularly for pastors that are listening, that you're not so myopic and teaching a small view of history. One of the things that I have found that's helped our church over the last few years is, well, I'm taking that back, for the last few months, is I say to them, how would you live if there was no Republican Party or Democratic Party? And I'll pause. And then I'll say, keep in mind, for 2,000 years, and even to this day, that's the way 99.99999% of Christians have lived their faith. If you can't live your faith without the Republican Party or Democratic Party, your faith has been hijacked and you're following an elephant, a MAGA, or a donkey and not the lamb.
Yeah, man, that's a fantastic question for all of us to ask and wrestle with. And again, it just goes back to what you said about the way of Jesus. We can't end hatred and violence with more hatred and violence. The only way to bring a close to that cycle is love and self-sacrifice.
Yeah, but it comes back to this, right? Whatever your heart desires most is what your actions will pursue. And when nationalism, whether it be left whacked out progressive nationalism, or whether if it's whacked out right conservative nationalism, religion is only used for the conquest of power. And so that's why I think we have a I take vitamin D because I had a vitamin D deficiency. Well, I think pulpits in America, respectfully, I say this with humility, have a gospel deficiency. And as a result, our people are unhealthy. There's a reason why our congregation members will listen more to Tucker Carlson or some right-leaning pundit or left-leaning pundit more than pastors, is because we have not taught them the beauty and the grandeur of King Jesus. Ephesians 1:10 says, all things are going to be united unto Christ. He is sovereign. He is God. He is King. He's not Burger King. He's not asking you how you want it your way.
Yeah.
He's the King of Kings. And by grace, he has summoned us into his holy courts to become his temples, to become his people, to become his body, to do his bidding on earth. And that is picking up our cross and following him. And what we do is we pick up our voters' guides. What we do is we pick up a second mortgage. What we do, let me stop now.